The Boston Celtics became the third team in the last 20 NBA finals to start 8 NBA finals with a road win last night when they defeated the Golden State Warriors 120-108. And joining me to break that action down once again is Locked On Warriors podcast host Cyrus Saatsaz. Cyrus, let's go ahead and dive into this. The Dubs, they were up by 12 to start the fourth quarter, and then the Celtics just went on a ridiculous run, outscoring the Warriors 40-16 in the final quarter. You were right there, Cyrus. What happened to the Dubs down the stretch?
It was a combination of things. I mean, first of all, there's just nothing you could do when a team shoots that lights out. I mean, Al Horford went 6 for 8 from 3. Derek White went 5 for 8 from 3. Marcus Smart went 4 for 7 from 3. The Celtics collectively shot over 51% from beyond the arc, which is just, these are just absurd numbers. There's not much you could do. I mean, the Warriors lacked aggressiveness in terms of at least getting in their faces, putting up those shots. Draymond Green had a horrible game. I mean, this was not a game that by his standards was in any way decent. And the good news is, like, a player like Draymond Green rarely has back-to-back bad games like that, but the Warriors have to make adjustments. I mean, one of the strengths of the Warriors entering this series especially was their depth. I think we talked about the fact that the Celtics are going to go 8 deep in the rotation, maybe 9 at the most. Well, the Warriors only went 8, and that 8th man was Andre Iguodala, who hasn't played since first round of the playoffs. I predicted the Warriors in 5 if they were healthy, but I did mention that Gary Payton II was going to be a huge part of this, and to not see him out there in game 1 was concerning. I mean, I'm hearing mixed things about whether or not we're going to see him at all in this series, because I guarantee a lot of those threes aren't falling, or at least are being contested. If Gary Payton II is out there, he's that good defensively. So the Warriors need to kind of, they got to look in a mirror and first ask themselves why they came out with such a lack of urgency to start that fourth quarter. Because like you said, they started the fourth up by 12. They were up by as much as 15 in the third quarter. I talked to Hall of Famer Rick Barry this morning, and he called me last night, actually, right after the game, and said what he thought was the biggest problem for the Warriors was their lackadaisical approach offensively to start the fourth, because they turned the ball over repeatedly. They had 4 turnovers, which led to 2 Celtics 2s and 2 Celtics 3s. And that just started the cascade of momentum. So the Warriors have to make adjustments. One of those is whether or not Jordan Poole is right for this series. I mean, any NBA playoff series is all about matchups. Jordan Poole was horrible. I mean, there was nothing really. There were very few bright sides from his performance. I mean, the moment looked big for him. And if he comes out like that again in game 2, the Warriors really need to look at that bench and see if Moses Moody might be a better a fit. He's bigger. He outweighs Jordan Poole by 25 pounds. He's got a 7'1" wingspan for 6'5" player. He can shoot the 3. He showed tremendous composure and poise in the Western Conference Finals. Nemanja Bjelica is another player that they have to consider, because with the Warriors, if there's one thing I took from that game 1 loss, is that whatever lineup you have out there, at least 4 of the 5 guys have to be two-way players. When Robert Williams III is out there, he's not an offensive threat per se. So you can stick a Kevon Looney on him. You can stick a Draymond Green on him. But otherwise, you have to have two-way players. And Jordan Poole is a huge liability defensively. And if he's not making up for that with great offense, he's a complete liability for them. So, and Bjelica would be a great fit, just because Bjelica's weakness is defense, but Al Horford is not a player that's going to blow by you attacking the rim. So Bjelica can match up with him while offensively spacing the floor for the Warriors, given he's a three-point threat. Jonathan Kuminga is a name that my Locked On Warriors partner Kylan Mills this morning mentioned as a possibility of getting some more minutes. He is incredibly athletic. He can play both sides of the ball. He's still very young at 19, so who knows if we're going to see him. But ultimately, look, I mean, when a team shoots that amazingly lights out, there isn't much you can do. Al Horford had a similar shooting percentage in the Bucks series. I think it was game 4. Don't quote me on the exact game, but he went 5 for 7 in a game and scored 30 points. Yeah. In this game, he went 6 for 8 from 3, and from 3, I should add. And in this game, he went 6 for 8 from 3 and put up, I think, 26. But at the same time, the rest of that series, he did not have another game like that, where he was shooting this lights out. And I think that's what Draymond Green was alluding to in his post-game attribution, talking about how they're not worried about that being a repeat occurrence. But at the same time, the Warriors in a lot of ways gave that game away again with just a very lackadaisical approach to start the fourth quarter. They weren't moving the ball. They were playing ISO ball offensively, which led to poor shot selection, which led to turnovers. And that just started the snowball rolling for the Celtics. And here we are. Yeah, the Warriors are down 1-0.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that you touched on was Jonathan Kuminga. I think he only played 48 seconds of game one, and that was at the end of the game.
Yeah.
You said Steve Kerr decided to go with Andre Iguodala. Is that just trusting Andre because he's been in moments like this before? Why would you, I guess, surmise is the reason that Coach Kerr decided to go with Andre in that situation instead of Kuminga, who is a rookie but has played more, especially in these playoffs?
Yeah, the Iguodala decision was based largely on his defense. I looked at the matchups, and Iguodala actually did really good. A huge reason why Jason Tatum's scoring was so low was because Iguodala played 10 minutes on him. That was almost his entire defensive matchup, and it worked. The problem with the Warriors is if you're going to play Iguodala, you're going to have to look at Draymond Green and decide whether or not you want to give up that much offense, because those are two players who just don't have much of an outside shot. I know Iguodala hit that 3-pointer, but that's not, you can't count on that. That's not something that's going to be consistently happening. I really don't mind him playing out there just because defensively he's still very stout. And again, Jason Tatum's scoring numbers were largely because of his defense. But I don't think the Warriors can survive having Iguodala and Draymond Green out there at the same time consistently, just because you're losing so much offensively. Again, Draymond just had a nightmare game. He went 2 for 12 from the field. If he just makes one of those threes, if he just makes a few more baskets, we might be looking at a different story. So I don't mind Iguodala too much. But one switch I would like to see, or one adjustment, is Andrew Wiggins playing more minutes. Andrew Wiggins was playing solid defense on Jaylen Brown, and what really started that whole role for the Celtics in the fourth quarter was Jaylen Brown. When you look at the way that the game was rolling on the play-by-play basis, they started the fourth quarter, the Warriors up by 12, and then Jaylen Brown makes an 18-foot step back jumper. Jaylen Brown makes a 3-pointer. Shortly after that, Jaylen Brown makes another 3-pointer. Jaylen Brown makes a driving layup, and all of a sudden, the Celtics are now just down by 3. And that's what started everything, because soon after that, Peyton Pritchard hit a 3-pointer. Derek White hit two 3-pointers. Al Horford then made two 3-pointers. And then by that point, it was just over. The Celtics had taken control. And for some reason, Kerr did not bring Andrew Wiggins back in the game until the 6-minute mark. And Wiggins finished with 34 points on the game when he should be playing 40 minutes realistically. I mean, Wiggins should have been out there for much longer, just because while his 3-point shooting is sketchy, it's not something you could completely rely on. It is inconsistent. He is still a threat out there as an offensive player, and physically and in terms of style of play, he's the closest thing the Warriors have to a Jimmy Butler type. And we saw what Butler did to the Celtics defense. So I personally expect Wiggins to play more. I hope he plays more, just because that is needed for sure.
For sure, yeah. And you mentioned Al Horford earlier. Yeah, he had 26 points. I think that might be a finals record for a player in their debut. So talk to me about his impact on the game, not just offensively, but defensively, and how big of a threat is he going to be as this series continues?
I think if he continues shooting the way he does, the Celtics probably have this series, because that's for him to have that kind of night. There's only so much the Warriors can do. I mean, the good news for the Warriors is that is not the norm, at least statistically speaking, based on patterns. But at the same time, if he continues playing like that, that is a huge problem. But that also could have been neutralized again if they had just had a man on him. I mean, all those threes were wide open. The Warriors made a conscious decision, I think, to focus largely on Jason Tatum, number one, defensively. Close second, Jaylen Brown, but you can't leave players that wide open. I mean, those were not contested threes, and that's why I keep bringing up Nemanja Bjelica. The Warriors added him to the roster last offseason for a reason. He's a big who has a lot of offensive skills, and you don't need like a savant on the defensive side to guard Al Horford. You just need someone on him. And Al Horford, he's a big boy. I mean, he actually muscled his way in past Draymond Green for one of those baskets early in the game. I think that's when he did his whole flex. which I'm guessing Draymond will take notice of. But and he blew a kiss to the crowd. I mean, believe me, the Warriors are going to take notice of that. If there's one thing I'm very confident of, is that the Warriors will bounce back and win game 2. I'm incredibly confident of that. I just, but part of it is just human nature. I think the Celtics are going to come away with this seeing, okay, we got what we needed here. We got the split. I'm not saying they're just going to lay down in game 2, but the Warriors, when they have a tremendous sense of urgency, are damn near unbeatable. And they're going to have that urgency, because if they fall 0-2 in this series, I think it's over. And I'm guessing they realize that as well. But yeah, they just need to have a man on him. And when Bielitsa has played in this series, in the playoffs, I'm sorry, the Warriors have been successful. He's been doing great things for him. I don't know what the hesitancy is in playing him, so I do hope he sees about 10 minutes out there in game 2, because I do think he could at least even things out with Horford, because you're right, Horford was that X factor in this game. He is the reason why the Celtics won that game.
Gotcha. Yeah, I agree. Bielitsa, adding him into the lineup, I think that would be very successful for the Warriors. All right, Cyrus, wrapping up here, got a few more questions for you. Wanted to touch on Steph Curry. 21 points in the first quarter, NBA Finals record, 6 3-pointers in the first quarter. But then you look at his stats for the rest of the game. I believe he went 5 for 16 for the rest of the game, only had 13 points. Still finished with 34 points, which is pretty darn impressive. But what did you see the Celtics doing that may have frustrated Steph a little bit after that amazing first quarter?
I didn't really see much of the rest of the game. I know the stats show that he kind of came back to earth a little bit, but I didn't really see much for the entirety of the game in terms of them frustrating Steph. I think part of it is Steph wanted to involve his teammates. Maybe he needs to take a bigger role. I mean, and I think we saw an attribution today where Steph said that he would be open to an increase in minutes, an increase in handling the ball, an increase in usage rate. But ultimately, I took that, even though like a bulk of those points came in the first quarter, I saw Steph as a positive, because one of the questions coming into the series was whether or not Marcus Smart can guard him one-on-one. And what we saw from that game, even though they tightened up a little bit moving forward, we saw more double teams. So Steph was forced to get the ball out of his hands after that. So the positive from that is Marcus Smart is not going to be able to guard Steph one-on-one. We learned that right away. The problem is the Celtics adjusted fast and started doubling him, and no one else made up for it. Klay Thompson finished with 15 points. He had a poor shooting night. He made some big threes, but his overall field goal percentage was very low. And again, 15 points is not enough for your number 2 scorer. Jordan Poole vanished. I mean, he scored 9 points in that game. He had the lowest plus minus of all the Warriors on the floor. So, when they double Steph, because that's what happened. They started doubling Steph, and no other Warriors were able to step up when they should have. And I think that's what's going to change in game 2. And I still took it as an encouragement that Marcus Smart, as good as he is defensively, I just don't think there's anyone on the planet who can guard Steph one-on-one. So now the question is, who's going to step up, because they're going to probably double Steph again, and someone else is going to have to score. And if that doesn't happen, they're in huge trouble. Otto Porter Jr. had a great game. He went 4 for 5 from beyond the arc. I'd like to see a little more minutes from him. He had 23 in game 1. Even though he's on a minutes restriction, he's been on that the whole season at 25 minutes. I mean, push that up to 28 if you have to. It's the NBA Finals, like he's huge out there. The bottom line is the Warriors need offense. The Warriors need scoring to help Steph out. And the question is who's going to do that and if they're going to do that. So I'm not worried about Steph. I'm more worried about the rest of the team helping him in the offense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you mentioned Klay. Yeah, he was 6 for 14 in the game, and he had 15 points, like you said. Were the Celtics doing anything with Klay that you saw that really frustrated him, or was it just he was just missing shots? From what I saw, it looked like he was just missing shots.
I just thought he was missing shots. He had similar point outages. Like he scored 15, I think, in game 1 and 2 in the Dallas series, and maybe the Grizzlies series as well. Don't quote me on that, but I know it's close. It's in that range. He had very similar starts in almost every playoff series. I don't know why that is. He always plays best when he's under pressure, which is why you see these game 6 Clays or the game 5 Klay in the last series. We're just going to have to start seeing every game Klay. It's just, I don't know what the reason is for it, but his shot was clearly off. And his 3-point shot wasn't bad. Like, I don't think the percentage was bad either, but his overall field goal percentage, he was just missing. Those looks were open. I don't know why. And I don't know if Clay knows why, but he's going to have to improve there. And again, Jordan Poole is a player who just had a horrible game. There's just no way to spin that. He's just going to have to either have a better game, or Kerr is going to have to pull back his minutes and give it to players like Bielitsa and Moody and Kuminga possibly. The Kuminga thing is interesting just because he actually started three of the three of the games against the Memphis Grizzlies in the second round. And that's the most comparable team to the Celtics group in terms of length, athleticism, even defensive schematics in terms of being switch happy. Kuminga did not play well in that series. And that's where we saw Kevon Looney kind of step back in. So I don't know if I don't think it would hurt to try. I would like to see some minutes out there for sure. But he's also only 19 years old, and I just don't know if they can rest their hopes on him, but we'll see. I mean, I'm not pressing any panic buttons after game one. I don't think anyone should. It's one game. Again, they lost to a team that shot remarkably. I mean, that was all-time great level shooting. And the question to me is going to be, can the Celtics sustain that? I don't think so, but the Warriors are also going to have to shoot better. And they're just going to have to get better play on both sides of the ball. And that means maybe putting Iguodala and Draymond Green and Kevon Looney, space those guys out in terms of their minutes. I don't think you could have all three of them on the court together just because offensively they don't give enough. So we'll see what the adjustments are. Steve Kerr is a all-time Hall of Fame coach for a reason, and I'm curious to see what happens in the game too.
Sure. All right, Cyrus. Yeah, me too. My final question for you, we've kind of touched on it, some of the things the Warriors will have to do to make sure they win game two. But who are some of the players that you see? The Celtics are 8-2 in these playoffs now in road games. So they know how to play on the road. They're not fazed by playing on the road. So who are the players? I think we've mentioned Clay, we mentioned Jordan Poole. Who are some other players that you see in game two that will need to step up if the Warriors want to make sure the Celtics don't go to 9-2 on the road in postseason?
Yeah, that's where, that is the one thing I did miss. I did not think the Warriors would lose at home, and right away that was wrong for me. So I'll take responsibility for that. The Celtics are a phenomenal road team. I think in game two, I think Moses Moody is a player that he stepped up in that Maverick series. He saw real minutes. It came out of the blue. No one expected it, certainly, but when he played, he showed poise. I mean, he's a big boy. Like he's 6'5" with a 7'1" wingspan, as I mentioned a moment ago. He's 220 pounds. So he gives you muscle out there despite being 6'5". He gives you length. He's proven shockingly for his age. I mean, Klay Thompson and Steve Kerr have referred to him as him being an old soul, given his maturity. And but he was drafted primarily because he's a great 3-point shooter. I mean, he's got an outside shot. So I think he could be an X factor in this series. But I am very curious to see what the coaching staff drums up, because they have brilliant minds there. I mean, Mike Brown got poached by the Sacramento Kings for a reason. Kenny Atkinson, speculation is he's going to go to the Charlotte Hornets, most likely, as their head coach. I mean, so they have a lot of bright minds there. Ron Adams, who's been with them from the beginning of this dynasty with Steve Kerr, is a brilliant tactician when it comes to defense. I'm very curious to see what they do in game two for those reasons. But I think if you look at X factors and names we haven't seen much, as I mentioned earlier, this, sorry to be redundant, but Moses Moody and then Nemanja Bjelica, I think, are two players that should get minutes in the series. And then there's still the mystery surrounding Gary Payton II. If Gary Payton II, I don't think it was a good sign that we didn't see him at all in game one. He didn't even play in garbage time. You would think if he was healthy enough to play, at least you'd want him out there to get his legs warmed up and at least get some of his sea legs back so he can be ready for game two or moving forward. But the fact that we didn't see him at all is concerning, because I think he is a huge difference maker for this Warriors team. He's all indications are he's going to be paid $10 million plus a year next year, whether it's with the Warriors or with someone else. So if he plays, I feel a million times better. Without him, I think you're going to have to see guys like Moses Moody and Bjelica and maybe Kuminga and even Damian Lee. Damian Lee is a very divisive player for the fan base of the Warriors, just because he's very inconsistent as a shooter. But as a veteran, he thrives in big moments. When he's hot, he's really hot. And at least defensively, he can contribute while being a floor spacer offensively, just because you're not going to see teams leaving him alone outside. So you might actually start seeing some minutes from him as well, because he's played a lot of meaningful minutes in the previous rounds. So we'll see. I mean, look, I mean, for the fans of the NBA, I think this is going to be a 7-game series. It's going to be a thriller. But if you're a member of Dub Nation, that was not cool seeing what happened in game 1. So yeah.
All right, Cyrus, I got you. All right, Cyrus. Well, thanks again for joining me. I forgot to do this last time, so I'll make sure I do it now. If people want to listen to the Locked On Warriors podcast, how can they do that? And then also leading up to game 2 on Sunday, what do you have on tap? What do you guys have on tap over at Locked On Warriors?
Yeah, I just recorded a new episode a moment ago with the Hall of Famer Rick Barry joined me. But him and I go way back, and then one of our local sports anchors, Kylan Mills, who joins me every Friday and is going to be joining me more frequently in Locked On Warriors, came on. So we did a whole breakdown in terms of individual matchups, schematics, what to expect for game 2. You can follow the Locked On Warriors Twitter account at Locked On Dubs. It's available on YouTube. Just search Locked On Warriors. And like I said, we pump out daily content. I pump out a live show with post reaction after every game in the NBA Finals. So yeah, check us out. We're available. And I got to bring you on sometime, Chandler. We'll make that happen at some point. But thanks for the promotion. Thanks for bringing me on. And you can follow me on Twitter as well at Dog Surf Roadshow. It's a weird Twitter account, but I love dogs. I love traveling. And so, and I love basketball as well. So here we are.